We've all heard the age-old quote, "Love thy neighbor." And for some fortunate people, good neighbors can be one of the best perks of their home. However, these days it seems that most people barely know their neighbors, let alone engage in regular conversations or establish trust with them. In an ideal world, we'd all have neighborly bonds where everyone looks out for each other's children, homes, and well-being. Unfortunately, the reality is that our hectic schedules and weariness of strangers often prevent us from knowing who our neighbors truly are. This was also the case for one hardworking father in Oklahoma who had not yet developed close relationships with his neighbors due to his demanding job. As a result, he advised his daughter to avoid talking to strangers and entering anyone else's home without his permission. One day when he got home from work, his daughter wasn't inside or playing in the breezeway of their apartment. She wasn't supposed to leave their building until he got home, and it was really unlike her not to be there. So initially, he hoped that she was just out riding her bike. But after looking around the apartment complex with no sign of her, he knew that something was wrong. A frantic search ensued, and soon numerous officers were trying to find his daughter, 10-year-old Jamie Rose Bolen. Despite not knowing each other well at all, several kind neighbors offered to help. But police couldn't shake the feeling that one of them may have known much more about Jamie Rose than the others. So before we get into things, I do want to give you guys a little bit of a trigger warning that this is one of the hardest cases that I have ever covered to date. So please take care of your well-being, and I want to just give you a heads up ahead of time. Hey guys, I'm Elise. This is 10 to Life. Let's jump right in. 10-year-old Jamie Rose Bolen was born on August 7, 1995, to Curtis Bolen and Jennifer Fox. She was born in Edmond, Oklahoma, and she had 3 half-siblings, Josh, Sarah, and Lori, all from other relationships that Jennifer was in when she wasn't with Curtis. Jennifer and Curtis were off and on for various reasons, but a lot of their issues started after Jennifer decided to pursue her childhood dream of driving semi-trucks. She gave full custody of her children to each of their fathers so that she could drive trucks, which would put her out of town the majority of the time. While she intended on seeing her children when she wasn't working, Jennifer unfortunately got introduced to substances while on the road. Many truck stops are known for being easy places to buy and deal substances, and Jennifer ended up becoming hooked on meth. During this time, her addiction took over, and visits with her children became far and few between. Curtis wanted to shield their daughter Jamie from this as much as possible, and he was said to have been extremely involved and loving and attentive and just a fantastic father. As a single parent, he really had no choice, but he was obviously doing a pretty good job because everyone who knew Jamie said that she was a happy, silly, and carefree little girl. She loved to sing, sew, ride four-wheelers, and watch movies. Jamie and her dad loved to play checkers together as well, and she was obsessed with reading. Jamie looked just as vibrant as her personality, too. She had these gorgeous blue eyes, adorable freckles, and she got the nicknames Copper Top and Strawberry Shortcake for her fiery red hair. She was primarily raised in a city called Dibble, but when she was in the 4th grade, Curtis decided to move them to Purcell. Purcell is in a suburban area that is located right outside of Oklahoma City. It's located in McLean County and is known as the Heart of Oklahoma. It's said to be a small town with a tight-knit community, and Curtis and Jamie got an apartment in a complex called Purcell Park. In Purcell, Jamie began attending 5th grade at Purcell Intermediate School. She was one of those girls that never had a bad word to say about anyone, and her lightheartedness just made people want to be her friend. Jamie loved going to school to socialize with her classmates, and she was said to find something funny in any situation and just had a very infectious laugh that could instantly put anyone in a good mood. Now, since she was such an avid reader, she was also very intelligent and even won several academic awards. Jamie not only had friends at school, but she had a close group of friends in her Girl Scout troop as well. She was really just a well-rounded, beautiful girl, and it's no wonder that she was so loved by everyone who knew her. At Curtis and Jamie's apartment in Purcell Park, one of her favorite things to do was to ride her blue bike through the breezeways of the apartment buildings. Jamie was what is known as a latchkey kid, which refers to kids who wear keys around their necks to let themselves into their houses, or sometimes the key is also just hidden outside somewhere. Now, this is usually because after they get home from school, their parents are still at work. Curtis worked as a mechanic, and he'd usually only be a few hours at the most before getting home from work after Jamie had already arrived. The residents of Purcell Park would often keep their porch doors open or sit outside on their porch balconies, but Curtis didn't really know any of them that well, other than recognizing their faces and saying hello every now and then. Jamie, however, who was frequently playing outside, had a habit of striking up conversations with the neighbors, mostly out of boredom and because she was just a chatty kid. Curtis and Jamie lived on the second floor, but one of her favorite neighbors was a young guy that she had met on the first floor. He was in his 20s and always had his white pet rat sitting on his shoulder, which Jamie thought was the cutest thing ever. The guy was kind of quiet, but was friendly when spoken to, and he let Jamie pet the rat whenever she saw him. He was one of the neighbors who would occasionally leave their breezeway or patio door open, and Jamie had even just wandered in a few times asking to see the rat. He never got upset, but Curtis had told Jamie that if she was going to go into anyone's houses, she needed to ask his permission first. He told her definitely not to go into anyone's houses when he wasn't home, especially because they didn't have a working house phone at the time, so she wouldn't be able to call and ask for permission from him anyway. The week of April 10th, 2006 was an exciting time for Jamie and her classmates, because Sunday the 16th was Easter, and most of them would be getting baskets from the Easter Bunny, dyeing eggs, having Easter egg hunts, and fun times with their families. And Jamie was particularly excited, not just for Easter, but she would be getting to spend it with her mom, Jennifer. By April of 2006, Jennifer had now been clean and sober for just over a year. She was getting her life back together, and that meant spending more time with her children as well. The beginning of the week started out great for Jamie, especially because Curtis let them get pizza one night for dinner. Since they didn't have a house phone, Jamie and Curtis would usually go outside to a payphone just across from their apartment building. So Curtis told Jamie that she could go and order the pizza herself. So she ran down the stairs of the building to go use the payphone. When she got to the downstairs breezeway, the young man with the rat was outside of his apartment. Jamie figured she could just ask to use his phone, and he told her that she could. So she stepped inside the door for a second. But when he brought her the cordless phone, she told him that she better take it outside because her dad didn't like her going into other people's apartments without permission. So the neighbor understood, and she was obviously obedient and tried her best to listen to her dad. Wednesday, April 12th, was a typical day for Jamie. Curtis usually drove her to school in the mornings, so she'd walk home from school and let herself into the apartment with a key. She'd go inside, get a snack, and maybe change clothes before taking their dog out to use the bathroom just outside of the building. She was then supposed to do her homework before she could go play or ride her bike outside through the breezeway until her dad got home. However, that Wednesday, after walking all of the way home, Jamie realized that she had forgotten her house key at school. She was hot and tired, but her bike was outside, just leaning against the wall of their building. So she decided to ride her bike back to school to get the key. After riding back and finding the key, she decided to hang out with a friend for a while in the library before going back home. They played some games on the computer before the other girl's mom came to pick her up, and she later recalled watching Jamie wave goodbye as she rode away on her bike. When Jamie got back home, it was about 3:30 p.m. Before going up to her apartment, she saw the same downstairs neighbor outside, and she told him how annoyed she was about having to go all the way back to school because it was so hot outside. Jamie then went upstairs, changed her clothes, and got a mug of ice milk. After cooling down for a few minutes, she decided that she would go back outside to play in the breezeways. Curtis got home from work that evening around 5 p.m. He didn't see Jamie outside, but when he got into their apartment, she wasn't inside either. He noticed that their dog seemed like he really needed to go to the bathroom too, which meant that Jamie must have forgotten to take him out. He was a little surprised that Jamie would have gone away from their building, and when he took the dog outside, he saw that her bike was gone as well. So Curtis figured that she probably found some kids to play with and was riding her bike around the complex or playing with them in the courtyard. So he put their dog back inside and decided to go walk around the complex to find her. He didn't see any kids around, and he called her name loudly throughout the complex, but there was no sign of Jamie. Trying to stay calm, Curtis thought that maybe Jamie had gone to the library, but usually if she stayed there after school, she would have been home by now. So he quickly drove to the library, and he was told that Jamie had been there with a friend, but that she left a little after 3 p.m. So Curtis started to get more and more worried with each passing minute, and he drove to Jamie's best friend's neighborhood. Her friend told Curtis that she had seen Jamie ride her bike back toward the direction of their apartment. Now at that point, Curtis was becoming absolutely frantic, and he raced back to the apartment to see if she had gotten home yet. He then went to ask the apartment manager for help, and the manager went with him door to door in the complex, asking anyone if they had seen Jamie. At around 5:45 p.m., one of the neighbors who lived in the same building arrived home and saw Curtis and the manager worriedly knocking on doors. So he asked them what was going on, and they told him that they couldn't find Curtis's daughter, and they wondered if he had seen her. The neighbor told them that he actually had seen her when he was leaving his house around 4 p.m. He said that she was standing in the downstairs breezeway talking to that young man who has the pet rat. So Curtis and the manager hurried over to his unit and knocked on the door, but they got no answer. Right as they were about to walk away, the man opened the door and asked if everything was okay. They said that they were looking for Jamie and wondered if he had seen her and where she went. He told them that he had seen her earlier in the day and that she left on her bike riding the direction of the library. He then said that he wished he could help look for her, but he had to be up really early in the morning for work and needed to go back to bed. Now at that point, they realized that something must have happened to Jamie after she rode away on her bike, so they called 911 to report her as missing. Soon, dozens of police officers, firefighters, community members, and neighbors were scouring the area looking for any sign of Jamie and her bike. They searched through the night, and Curtis needed to call Jennifer now to let her know that their daughter was missing. Jennifer was driving a semi when she got the call, and she remembers that when Curtis told her Jamie was missing, it was like her brain completely left her body. She ended up drifting onto the shoulder with only half of the huge truck on the road, and she was so upset that she had to be driven by friends back to Purcell. The next morning, the Purcell Police Department realized that they weren't going to be able to do this on their own. Not even one day into their investigation, and they requested assistance from the FBI, who joined the search without hesitation. When they arrived, they added over 24 federal agents to aid in the search, and they began to question people for leads. Back at the library, several people swore that they saw a red-haired little girl matching Jamie's description get into a dark blue Chevy Tahoe with Texas license plates and a large Fox racing sticker on the back window. So with a potential vehicle description, the state issued an Amber Alert for Jamie and the Chevy Tahoe. The FBI decided to analyze the computers that Jamie and her friend had been using and believed that she could have possibly been chatting online with a predator before her disappearance. So while the search continued, Jamie's whole family gathered together and sat outside of the apartment building on lawn chairs, waiting for any news and hoping that she would miraculously ride up the road on her bike. On April 14th, 2 days after Jamie went missing, the FBI and the police department worked together to set up roadblocks on streets surrounding the apartment complex. They hoped that they could get leads from drivers in the area who may have seen something around the time when Jamie went missing. At around 3:45, an FBI agent was questioning drivers in one of the roadblocks, and he came across a person who had some information about Jamie. The truck was being driven by an older man with a young adult male passenger. The driver told the agent that he heard about the little girl going missing, and he motioned to the passenger and said, "My son here is actually her neighbor." The agent remembered from questioning people at the complex that a young man was the last person to see Jamie before she rode away on her bike. So he asked if the young man would come into the patrol car and talk for a moment so that he could write down everything that he saw before Jamie went missing. The neighbor agreed, and his father waited in the truck while they went to talk. The neighbor told the agent that his name was Kevin Underwood, and he lived below and across from the little girl and her father. Further into their conversation, Kevin started to say some things that really piqued the agent's curiosity. He said that he had been afraid of being considered a suspect because he had been hanging around outside his apartment a lot during the last couple of weeks. He then said that he saw Jamie the day that she went missing, but that the media reports of the clothes that she was wearing were incorrect. The agent asked if he would be willing to come to the police station to give a more in-depth description, because Jamie being in other clothes other than what she was seen in at school could potentially be a very important piece of information and piece of evidence in their investigation. So Kevin agreed, and the agent told his father that he would give him a ride home after his interview. When they got to the station, Kevin started talking unprompted to the agents about how he wasn't the best at talking to people. He said that he had panic attacks and social anxiety, but that he was on Lexapro, which was helping him with that. So the agents asked him what kind of clothes he saw Jamie in, and he said that the media reported that she was wearing a pink shirt, but that when he saw her, she was actually wearing a blue shirt and pink shorts. After that, he said that he went back inside his apartment and chatted online to a friend for a couple of hours. Kevin talked to the agents for only about an hour before they stepped out into the hall and agreed that they were getting some weird vibes from him. They went back in and said that they were finished and that one of them could take him back to the apartment. When they arrived, the agent decided to take a chance and ask Kevin if he could look around his apartment, just so they could say that they had looked everywhere in the complex. Kevin agreed to the search, but the agent had no idea that something in the apartment would send this case into a disturbing direction that nobody saw coming. So quickly, let's get more background on Kevin. 43-year-old Kevin Ray Underwood was born in Pauls Valley, Oklahoma on December 19, 1979 to parents Larry and Connie Underwood. 11 years later, Kevin became an older brother to his little sister Marcy, and the family moved to Purcell in McLean County, Oklahoma. As Kevin grew up, he faced numerous challenges during his school years. His bright red hair and his weight made him an easy target for teasing and for bullying. So in an attempt to seek attention, he resorted to being the class clown. But unfortunately, this only made him appear even weirder to his peers. He would make strange noises and talk to himself, and as we all know, kids at school can be brutal and very cruel to anyone who's a little bit different. According to Kevin's mother, he was a happy and normal little boy before starting school. However, once he entered elementary school, everything changed. He seemed to withdraw from his family and started refusing hugs or any other affectionate gestures, and eventually avoided physical contact altogether. He also struggled with bedwetting long past the age that would be considered typical. Despite his difficult experiences, Kevin found some solace in high school when he joined the school band and learned to play the saxophone. Although he didn't particularly enjoy it, he just wanted to find a place where he could belong. Unfortunately, though, even in high school, the relentless bullying persisted. His self-esteem plummeted, but things improved slightly after he found a small group of supportive friends, particularly his best friend, Chris. Having even just a couple of friends made school a little bit more tolerable for him. One positive aspect of Kevin's life was his intelligence. He started reading at a third grade level in kindergarten and college level books by the third grade. He consistently outperformed his peers in terms of reading and comprehension, which fueled his passion for reading books. Kevin immersed himself in books on various subjects, but seemed to be drawn toward topics about religion, philosophy, science fiction, and fantasy. Over time, he also developed a love for comic books and for anime. Additionally, playing video games both alone and with his friends became one of his favorite things to do. However, it was during the early 2000s that Kevin discovered his true passion, the internet. As the internet gained popularity, it opened up a whole new world for people to connect, to learn, and to engage in chat rooms. Now, if you were a kid before the 2000s, you'll definitely remember how exciting chat rooms, Yahoo, AOL Instant Messenger, all of those things were.
You've got mail.
I mean, I was in that era, and it was like literally the startup sound of AOL and then the you got mail notice and the buddy list popping up. It's like it's like a hit of dopamine. Thinking back on it, it was the best. And for Kevin, the internet provided an outlet to connect with people beyond his small town and an opportunity to find individuals who shared his interests from all over the world. He almost became addicted to chat rooms because there he could express himself in ways that he never could in person. Between reading, video games, the internet, and all of his other various interests, Kevin proudly embraced the label of a self-proclaimed nerd. Kevin graduated from Purcell High School in 1998. A few of his friends ended up enlisting in the military, and Kevin thought that he should try to do something with his life as well. So he enrolled in college at the University of Science and Arts of Oklahoma. But his college experience didn't turn out the way that he had hoped. The only socializing that Kevin ever did was with his small group of friends. And now that he was amongst people he didn't know, he started to develop a lot of anxiety. The more he tried to push himself to be social and interact in class, the more anxious and self-conscious he became. He started having panic attacks before class and would sit in his car for hours outside of the school. Eventually, he stopped going to class altogether, and he decided to talk to his mom about what was going on. She told him that she thought he needed to see a psychiatrist, and he said that he would, but he said that he also didn't want to go to school anymore. Larry, Kevin's dad, was really disappointed in him apparently. He was always pushing Kevin to do more, to be more social, to try harder, and he couldn't understand the whole anxiety thing that Kevin was suffering from. So after dropping out of college, Kevin started to recluse in his bedroom at his parents' house even more. He sat on the computer for hours a day, chatting with people, reading, and playing games. It soon got to the point that he was having such bad social anxiety that when he'd even try to go to the store, he would think that everyone was looking at him, and his face would get bright red and hot and he would have to leave. Finally, his mom convinced him that he needed to go see a doctor, and he was put on the antidepressant Zoloft. At first, this really was helping Kevin. It helped Kevin's mood, and he even felt confident enough to go out and get a job. He ended up getting a job at the fast food restaurant called Carl's Jr., and there he made a few more friends. All of his friends knew that he was a little shy and a little weird, but being out in public more was improving his anxiety. However, what Kevin wanted more than anything wasn't just friends, it was a girlfriend. In high school, he never went out with any girls, he never kissed a girl, and he started to kind of obsess over the fact that no one ever seemed to be interested in him, not in a romantic way at least. At Carl's Jr., there were several coworkers that he was interested in, but he always seemed to end up in the friend zone, mostly because he was always too shy to express his feelings toward anyone. One day, Kevin overheard his good friend at work named Elise talking about her new blog, which was kind of like an online diary that people could read. So he talked to her about it and decided that he would make his own blog. And there he would make weekly and sometimes daily entries about his life for over 4 years. His blog ended up becoming a place where he could vent. He could talk about his lack of a love life, write all about his hobbies and interests, and tell stories. He actually ended up getting a good following on his blog too, from 2002 to 2006. However, over time, readers could kind of start to see a steady decline in Kevin's mental state. He always posted whiny and self-loathing rants, but it seemed like his obsession with never having a girlfriend and never being intimate with anyone was getting progressively worse. He also blogged about going in and out of deep depressions and even having thoughts of ending his own life. He'd make strange posts about taking ideologies from various religions and cults and started to develop an unhealthy addiction to pornography. Now, surprisingly, he put all of this out there himself for anyone to read. One constant topic on his blog was a girl from California named Melissa, who he had met online. Kevin and Melissa had sort of an on and off long-distance relationship, and he would talk about plans to move to California to be with her one day. Now, many of you may not remember, but in the early 2000s, the internet was still pretty much the Wild West. YouTube wasn't a thing until 2005, and before that, there were all different types of websites with video clips, funny pictures. However, on some of these websites, there seemed to be a fascination with violence and gore videos as well. You could be watching a hilarious cat video, and then the next link would be a gruesome car accident. It was a very, very weird time. The internet was wild. There was no guardrails at all in place. But Kevin started to really get into videos like this, and he and his friend Chris would exchange gory photos and gory videos to try to gross each other out. After 9/11, Chris decided to enlist in the Navy in 2002, and he had moved away to be stationed in another country, leaving Kevin with really no one to hang out with anymore. It seemed like after this, he started to resent the military, the president, and blogged constantly about 9/11 conspiracy theories. On his blog, Kevin also mentioned that after watching so much pornography, it seemed like nothing was able to do it for him anymore, and he began seeking out more intense content. It was like he was desensitized, and it was like his obsession with violent, gory videos and pornography were all now meshing together almost. And he was even becoming desensitized to things that would make other people absolutely sick. While working at Carl's Jr. and living at home, Kevin had no real expenses and was able to save most of his money. So he would buy things like video games, books, weird t-shirts from Hot Topic, comic books, and anime, but the rest of the money he would put into savings. The only actual bill that he had to pay was his car insurance. In 2005, Kevin decided that he was finally ready to move out of his parents' house. So he found a vacancy in a complex called Purcell Park, and when he moved in, he had enough money to buy all new furniture. The only problem was that Kevin had never lived on his own before, and he didn't know how to cook, he didn't know how to do his own laundry, and he had never actually been grocery shopping on his own before either. All of these were topics he covered on his blog, and even though at this point he was already 26 years old, it was like reading about an 18-year-old just stepping out into the world for the very first time on their own. So after living in Purcell Park for some time, he and Melissa had been communicating romantically again, and Kevin thought that he was head over heels in love with her. In actuality, he was probably confusing love with the excitement of someone showing him attention, and really, it was obvious that he was incredibly desperate to have sex with someone. However, after months of talking about wanting to be together, Melissa invited Kevin to come and live with her in California. Now, he was elated by this and immediately started planning how he was going to get there. He had told his parents about Melissa before, but they were kind of concerned with him going all the way there to move in with someone that he had never actually met in person, especially with his history of social anxiety. Regardless, Kevin booked a flight and felt like for the first time, someone actually wanted him. Unfortunately, just days before he was supposed to leave for California, Melissa told him that she didn't think she was ready for a relationship and that she didn't want to mess up what they had as friends. It was a line that Kevin had heard from other girls before, but this time he was absolutely heartbroken. Kevin's mother, Connie, has said that Melissa's decision crushed him, and afterwards she said that he started slipping into a darker depression than ever before. Once again, she tried to encourage him to go and see a doctor, but after his previous medication, Zoloft, stopped working, he quit taking it, thinking the antidepressants just didn't work for him. Thinking he was going to be moving, Kevin had already quit his job at Carl's Jr., so now he was depressed, jobless, and withdrawing more and more from the outside world. After a few months of feeling worse than he had ever felt before, he finally got to the point where he felt like he had hit rock bottom, and he decided to take himself back to the doctor. This time the doctor diagnosed him with severe social anxiety and major depressive disorder, and he was prescribed the medication Lexapro. After being on this new medication for just a short time, Kevin started to gradually feel a little bit better. In fact, he started to feel like he had even more energy than ever before, and like he could maybe actually go out and socialize with other people other than just his close friends. Since he had been without a job for several months, his savings was dwindling, but under no circumstances did he want to go back to Carl's Jr. His father Larry mentioned to him that there was a stocking position opening up at the grocery store where he worked, and that the pay was really good. Larry had worked in the Grinders Buy for Less store meat department as a butcher for years, and his sister, Kevin's aunt, Valerie, worked there as well. The pay was much more than any other entry-level job that Kevin could get, and he'd also be able to save money on gas by riding with his dad to work as well. The store was about an hour away from Purcell, and Kevin wasn't too excited about spending 2 hours each day in the car with his dad, who had always been so hard on him. He and his father would also have to leave at 4 a.m. to make it to work by 5, but he wasn't in any position to pass up a good-paying job. After working at the grocery store for a couple of months, Kevin started to feel like he might not need to take the Lexapro anymore, because everything in his life seemed to be going a little bit better. He would take it sporadically, almost as kind of like an as-needed type of medication, which really isn't its intended use. And on his blog, readers noticed that he started to seem a little bit off again. He started filling out long surveys, which used to be really common on websites like MySpace, and one of the questions was, "Have you ever killed someone in your thoughts?" And his reply was constantly. He started writing aggressive posts, too, about his neighbors always being outside, talking loudly, and his annoyance with kids riding their bikes through the breezeway and running into his door. He started talking to Melissa again as well, because even though she had broken his heart, he didn't want to lose her completely. In one of their conversations, he told her, "If I don't have sex with someone soon, I'm going to kill someone." Now, of course, she took it as a joke, but she had no idea that during this time, Kevin's pornography addiction was getting worse and worse, and he even started downloading disturbing content like photos of women's autopsies. In one of his posts, he said that some of his fantasies were so disturbing that if anyone knew of them, he would definitely be put in jail. In today's world, a lot of his posts would be what people call incel-type behavior. And for those who aren't familiar with that term, incel stands for involuntary celibate. And it refers to people who have hostile views toward women and men who are sexually active. I actually did a video on this not too long ago about like the king incel, Elliot Rodger, and he's often been compared to Brian Kohberger, the accused murderer in Idaho. They seem to have similarities in my opinion. I mean, it's a deep rabbit hole. It goes to Papa Roger, all of these things, but I will link that video for you in the description. But Elliot Rodger, if you're curious about incel behavior and what incels are really truly like, this is the one video to watch because it has his own home movies in it where he's talking to the camera and hating on people. It's very, very disturbing, to say the least. So anyways, Kevin was thought to possibly be displaying incel-type behavior. And since Kevin didn't have anyone to hang out with at this point, he decided to get a pet rat for company. He named her Freya, and surprisingly, even the presence of a tiny rat brought him a lot of comfort. He started carrying her around on his shoulder, and whenever he was sitting outside, some of the neighbor kids would see the rat and ask to pet it. People in the neighborhood generally thought that Kevin was a little bit weird and awkward, but he didn't party or cause any problems, so they figured that he was just a nice enough guy that just liked to keep to himself and was a bit odd. At the beginning of 2006, Kevin wrote a blog post that said, "Pretty much every time I get drunk, I get depressed, whether I was depressed before I started or not. Pretty much every time I get drunk, I end up punching brick walls or at least fighting the urge to punch things and freak out, especially if I'm in a party situation where there's more than 2 or 3 people around, because I can't handle the social interaction and I get pissed off. Pissed off at myself for not being able to be social, and pissed off at other people because they can, and pissed off at God for making me this way. If there is a God, pretty much the only time I believe in God is when I want to blame him for something, or when I'm really depressed to cry and beg him to make me better, to make whatever is wrong in my brain go away so that I can live like a normal person. That's all I want in life, is to be able to live like a normal person. I've been really bad again lately, probably worse than I've ever been before. Except for work, I've hardly left the apartment in close to 2 months. I keep not going to the store until I'm completely out of stuff to eat and have to go. Until a couple of days ago, I hadn't even taken my trash out in weeks. I could barely even get into my kitchen with all of the piles of trash everywhere and on every available counter space as well. Because along with the social anxiety, this time I seem to have developed tremendous apathy. I just sit here at the computer every minute of the day when I'm not at work. A week or so ago, I spent my day off sitting here at the computer, barely moving from the chair for 14 hours. I just can't make myself do anything, even simple stuff like pick up something that falls on the floor. I'm like, oh, I'll pick that up later maybe, and then it lays there for a week. Obviously, a very unsettling entry and some very concerning behavior. In March of 2006, one of the girls in his building started asking to pet Freya more and more whenever he was outside, and he let her, and he actually started to kind of appreciate someone paying attention to him. On April 12th, the same girl was outside, on her bike in the breezeway, and asked if she could come in and see his rat. Later, Kevin got a knock on the door from the girl's father, and the apartment manager as well, asking if he had seen her. Kevin told them that he saw her earlier, riding her bike in the direction of the library. He told them that he'd like to help them look, but that he had to be up early for work. When Kevin went back inside, he hopped on his computer before going to bed and talked to Melissa for a few minutes. In the conversation, Kevin told Melissa how the little girl in the apartment building was missing, and that he was kind of worried because he was the last person to see her. Melissa told him that he should tell her father that, but he said he didn't want the police coming in to search his apartment because of all of his horror movies, his swords, and weird books that might make them think that he was a suspect. Melissa thought this was kind of weird, but after that, she recalled that Kevin seemed to be in a much better mood than usual. The next day, Kevin went to work, but his coworkers recall that he seemed to be acting strange, even more than usual. On his way home, he was riding with his dad when they drove through that roadblock of the police who were questioning drivers about the little girl's disappearance. His father mentioned that Kevin was actually one of her neighbors, and the police asked him if he would be willing to give a statement about what he saw before she went missing. Kevin agreed, and he ended up going to the police station with the officers for that interview. Before that point, Kevin didn't even know the little girl's name, which the officers told him was Jamie Rose Bolen. Some of the things Kevin ended up telling the officers came off as a little odd, like how he was worried that he would be a suspect because he lived alone and was recently hanging outside a lot. They also thought that him remembering specifically what she was wearing when he had only seen her briefly for a quick little moment where she was petting his rat before riding away was a little bit strange as well. Less than an hour later, an officer told Kevin that he would go and take him home, and when they got there, Kevin was surprised when the officer asked if he could come in. He said he just needed to make sure that Jamie wasn't inside, so that he could say that they had looked everywhere in the apartment complex. Kevin agreed, and he and the officer went inside together. The officer looked around the apartment, which was cluttered, full of trash, video game boxes, food containers, and books. He also had a display of some kind of samurai sword and decorative knives, like the kind that you might see at a Renaissance fair. So they went back into Kevin's bedroom, where he had a computer desk set up and an office chair. There was a large walk-in closet in the bedroom, and the officer asked Kevin if he could go in there to look. Kevin agreed, and when the officer went in, he was hit by the overwhelming scent of Febreze, and he saw a bluish-gray Rubbermaid tub that had tape around the lid. He asked Kevin what was in the tub, and he said that it was his comic book collection. So the officer asked Kevin if he could open it. He nervously said yes, but as the officer started to pull away the tape, Kevin yelled, "Stop, just arrest me." The officer looked up at Kevin and said, "Where is she?" And Kevin responded, "She's in there. I chopped her up." He then started screaming and crying, "Oh my God, I'm going to burn in hell." The officer didn't even finish opening the box, and he put handcuffs on Kevin and called for backup, telling them that he believed he found Jamie. When other officers and FBI agents arrived, some took Kevin to the police station, but the main officer on the scene realized that he hadn't even looked inside that tub yet to confirm that Jamie was inside. So he went back to the closet, cut the tape off of the lid, and took off the lid. Inside that tub, there were clothes that matched what Kevin had told them Jamie was wearing earlier, a blue top and pink shorts. Under that, there was a black plastic bag. He cut open the bag and discovered Jamie's lifeless body inside. When Jamie's family was told the news, they were beyond distraught. Curtis, Jamie's father, actually had to be taken to the hospital and sedated for several days. However, at that point, no one had any clue how heinous the situation actually was. When crime scene investigation arrived, they began processing the scene. In the closet, there was one box filled with children's toys and another filled with adult sex toys and women's underwear. Back at the station, FBI agents informed Kevin of his rights, but he told them that he wanted to tell them what happened. They tried to remind him that he had the right to have an attorney present, but he was adamant that he just wanted to get everything off of his chest. The interview was recorded and has been posted online, and it's honestly one of the most disturbing confessions I have ever heard. For someone who had such a hard time talking to people due to extreme social anxiety, Kevin had no problem going into great detail about what he did to Jamie and why. Now, I'm not going to post the entire video here because it is extremely long and the transcript is almost 90 pages. But I will summarize what he said and add in a few clips because his unemotional tone makes everything that he is saying even more disturbing, if that's possible. The interview started off with Kevin explaining his educational background and what he did for work. Then he told the agents about his pornography addiction and how it started to evolve into more bizarre fantasies, and how he became interested in cannibalism and wondering how a human would taste. He said he was extremely sexually frustrated, and for about a month, he had planned to kidnap someone to harm them in a sexual way and violate them. And then his plan was that he was going to eat the person. He said he wasn't necessarily a pedo, but that a child would probably be easier to subdue. At his apartment, he started watching children playing outside, and he would begin pleasuring himself while thinking about kidnapping one of them. There was one little boy who was around 5 years old that always played outside of his building, and he originally had planned to grab him and bring him inside his apartment, but he says he always lost his nerve. He said that after he'd watched the kids and finished pleasuring himself, he would immediately feel sick and disgusted with himself. However, the thought of snatching one of the children consumed him, and he actually stuck a piece of duct tape and a pair of handcuffs right next to his front door so that if one passed by, he could quickly slap the tape over their mouths and handcuff them. He then said that when Jamie started coming around, he thought that since she was so trusting, she would be an easy target. He even said, and I quote, "She was so trusting. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else to kidnap her." He said that the more that Jamie came around, though, he actually started to like her because she was so nice to him, and he didn't feel like he could follow through on his plan with her, especially since she reminded him so much of his little sister. The agents brought up the fact that Jamie and Kevin's sister actually looked a lot alike and asked if he ever had feelings of hurting his own sister, but he said no. And actually on his blog, besides the women he was quote-unquote in love with, his little sister seemed to be the most important person in his life. The agents wondered if maybe he had some subconscious attraction toward his sister, But Kevin was adamant that that wasn't the case, and he was actually really worried about his family, especially his mom and his sister, finding out about all of this. The agents asked Kevin to describe his plan after he kidnapped a child, and he said that he wanted to bring them inside and force them to watch pornography so that he could explain what was happening to them, and that hopefully they would want to try it.
I certainly planned this out. I mean, I've been thinking about it for at least a month, so about a month.
Now, it wasn't specifically the girl in question, or what?
No, I told the guy earlier it could have really been anyone. I mean, age and it wasn't even, it wasn't necessarily a pedophile thing either. I mean, age and even gender didn't even really matter to me. I just, at first I just wanted basically to eat someone, and then it turned into, while I'm at it, I'm going to, get off, have sex with him.
Were you going to have sex before or after, or both?
Well, my plan, my original plan, the way I had envisioned it all going was I was going to just grab him and...
Just any person?
Yeah, just... well, I did kind of favor this girl a little. I'd seen her and I was like, I was kind of like, well, I'd really like her. But then as I saw her more and more, I'd think, no, I can't hurt her. She's nice. Well, like I said, I was just going to grab whoever, and I had some handcuffs and some duct tape. I was going to handcuff them and put the duct tape over their mouth so they couldn't scream. Like I said, gender didn't even really matter. I've never done anything with a guy, but I've always been, bi-curious. I got a vibrator and a couple of dildos. Then there's some novelty things like the handcuffs and blindfold.
Are they real functional handcuffs that would restrain somebody?
They've got the little releases on them. People could get out of them if they really tried. Yeah.
Okay, it's designed for.
Yeah. I got him at sex at Christmas.
He told them that in his bedroom he had a Barbie doll with pins and nails through the head, and that was something he wanted to enact in real life. Investigators later found barbecue skewers in his apartment, and he said that he had planned to stick those through the victim's cheeks and do horrible other things to cause pain that I don't even want to describe. He said other than that, he wanted to keep the body in really good condition so that he could keep it for a while in his bed.
Now, going back to the plan, you had the handcuffs and the duct tape.
Yeah, so what I was going to do is I was going to, like I said, yank them in there, restrain them, and if it was a kid, I was going to just make them sit there and watch some porn first, and then I was going to have sex with them. And then...
Were you going to try to turn them on with the porn and make it voluntary?
I was, kind of hoping that would happen, but I, figured it probably wouldn't.
So you assumed that you would have to do it by force?
Yeah, most likely.
Okay.
And then, after the sex, it would turn kind of violent. I'd start kind of torturing them a little and stuff like that.
How would you torture them? In your fantasies, what would you do?
Sticking large objects in their anus, causing them pain that way. I had some long barbecue skewers I bought. I was going to poke through their cheeks. I've got in that bag of porn, there's also a Barbie doll head I found on the ground a while back that I stuck some needles in. Kind of illustrates what was in my fantasy. It had like some needles in its cheeks and some nails in its eyes, but I wasn't intending on doing that because the torture was kind of a late addition because at first I wanted the body to be pretty much unharmed. Keep the corpse in my bed, sleeping with it, having sex with it for a day or two, and then I was going to start butchering them and cooking them. So,
okay. Did you buy any pots or any special things for that?
Just the barbecue skewers and some meat tenderizer powder, and hacksaw to cut open the head to get to the brain because I wanted to eat the brain and the heart and some of the organs.
It's been my experience that a lot of people who like or think about those kind of things maybe experiment with animals. Have you ever experimented with animals?
No. Then it went into, disposing of the body. I was probably going to keep the skull. But then, I was going to pretty much eat everything except for some of the organs, and those I figured I could, put it in a trash bag and probably throw away without too much chance of getting caught. So basically all that'd be left was bones. And I was going to try to, break the bones up into little pieces so they wouldn't be as visible and, dump them in a ditch somewhere.
Okay.
Or if, that was my original plan. That's what I wanted to do, but,
Have about that?
No, I know what I did was wrong, and, I know that I deserve to be punished for it. I'd been planning it, like I said, I'd been planning it for months, buying supplies and, trying to get the exact plan down of what I do and how I dispose of it afterwards.
And the exact victim.
And, like I said, I kind of wanted her, but it didn't really matter. I mean, that's to tell the truth, that's the main reason I was hanging out in front of my apartment, is to watch all the kids and watch all the people come and go on. It was, I had pretty much planned all along to probably get a kid, just mainly because they'd be easier to grab and easier to get rid of afterwards, smaller, and, put up less of a fight. Because of what I really wanted to do, I, had kind of planned it for that day, but I mean, I'd been planning it for like every day for like a month pretty much. I'd planned, to get her as she, walked in from school before she had a chance to even go upstairs, and, so it would look like she never came home from school, is what I wanted. But I was surprised and, kind of annoyed to learn that she'd already been upstairs and, come home and been upstairs and gone again. So I hung around waiting for her, and about 10-15 minutes after that, probably about 3:45 or so, something like that, she, came back home, just she didn't chain her bike up, she just propped it up against the stairwell there, and went upstairs and came back down about 4 o'clock in a new outfit.
She had changed clothes.
Yeah.
Her bike was still unlocked right there.
Yeah, it was still sitting there unlocked, which was good because that had been my plan all along, was to take the bike too, so if I couldn't get her on her way home from school to take the bike, so it would look like she, was out on her bike and got kidnapped or run off or something like that. I just kind of struggled with myself the whole time she was in there. And
was a struggle between right and wrong?
Or kind of, both that and, not wanting to get caught. But yeah, it was partly because, I can't do this, I don't want to do it, but then, I want to do this.
And there's a little bit of fear, like, hey, if I do this, I might get caught.
Yeah, that was a large part of it too, but anyway, and then I even had, I'd had all the stuff sitting there handy, on that, entertainment center right by my door. I'd had, like for the last month, I'd had a piece of duct tape stuck there, so, I could just grab them and slap the tape over their mouth, and also the handcuffs sitting there on the shelf, so, I could yank them in and restrain them, hopefully before they had the time to yell or anything.
He said that after violating the corpse for a couple of days, he would cook as much of it as possible so that there was less to get rid of, and it would be less likely for him to get caught. The officers asked him what kind of things they might find on his computer, and he said that there was a lot of stuff that he deleted after the police started quote-unquote sniffing around the apartments, and that most of the pictures that he pleasures himself to were pictures of dead women. He said that he didn't have any child content other than photos of kids in their bathing suits. The agents asked Kevin what it was that drew him to Jamie, and he said that he thought that she was kind of attractive and that he wouldn't mind killing her, having sex with her, and eating her. They asked him what about her was attractive to him, and his disgusting ass had the audacity to respond and say, well, not really attractive. She was kind of homely and chubby, not really my type, and her hair was really thin.
Did you find her attractive?
Not really, no. She was kind of homely. But that was a part of me that, kind of found her attractive, but at the same time, not really.
What did you mean by homely?
Well, she just had, she was almost bald. She had, really thin hair, really thinning hair. And,
what color was it again?
Light red. It was almost a blondish red. And, she was a little chubby, and, just kind of wasn't my type, basically.
She was a child. She was a child, and he talked about, it's just absolutely appalling and disgusting. And he talked about Jamie wandering into his apartment on different occasions to pet his rat. And even though he had several opportunities to follow through on his plan, he always talked himself out of it. He said that after he started taking his Lexapro again, it changed his personality, and it made him feel more confident to go through with his plan. On April 12th, Kevin said that he talked to Jamie briefly in the breezeway about her having to go back to school to get her key. The way he explained Jamie coming to and from school, it was clear that he had been watching her every day and knew her schedule. When she got back, she went upstairs, changed clothes, and then came back down with a mug of ice milk. He was standing outside of his apartment, waiting for her, and she asked if she could come in and see his rat, Freya. So he let her in, and she sat on the floor in front of the rat cage. Kevin put on SpongeBob on the TV, and Jamie sat there for about 15 to 20 minutes petting the rat and watching the show. He then went and picked up a wooden cutting board and stood behind Jamie for several minutes. Apparently, he was going back and forth with himself about whether or not he should go through with his plan or not. Finally, he decided it was now or never, and he violently struck Jamie in the head with the cutting board. He said he expected her to get knocked out, but that she jumped up, and so he struck her 3 to 4 more times.
And finally, I did it. And, as soon as I hit her.
What did she say when you hit her?
That's something that's, haunted me ever since it happened. She started yelling, "I'm sorry." Which, I'm just like, what is she sorry for? She didn't do anything wrong. It's me, I'm the one that should be sorry. She was just, why?
He said that he didn't want to leave too many marks on her because he wanted her body to remain perfect. So he got behind her in kind of a bear hug type position and put his hand over her nose and mouth to try to suffocate her. He says that he was surprised by how strong Jamie was and that it took all of his strength to wrestle her to the ground. He got her face down on the floor and kept his hand over her face. He said it took more than 15 minutes for her to finally stop breathing. Can you imagine doing something like that to a child for 15 long, drawn-out minutes? It's so crazy and haunting to even think about. He says that after she was limp, he stood up, but a few seconds later, Jamie gasped for air, and he jumped on top of her and had to start all over again. Jamie started reaching around, trying to find something to defend herself with, but a few minutes later, she passed out again. Kevin said he then put duct tape on her mouth and nose to make sure that she wouldn't be able to get any air again. And according to him, it was to make sure that she stayed dead for good. Kevin told the agents that during the attack, he became very aroused and that his underwear were soaked. It is so foul and so disgusting.
Yeah, I was kind of sitting on her, not really putting my full weight on her, kind of like on my knees with a little bit of my weight on her stomach to hold her down. And
did you feel aroused at that point?
Very, yeah. By the time I got done killing her, my underwear was soaked. When you get aroused, it'll start, kind of leaking a little.
Pre-ejaculation.
Yeah, it was. My underwear was pretty much soaked by the time she, even before she was completely dead. But,
so are you telling me you were sexually gratified during this struggle?
Pretty much, yeah.
Did you have an orgasm, or was it just?
I didn't orgasm, but I was, very, very aroused.
You had an erection, right?
Yeah. And, just standing there behind her debating on killing her or not, I was starting to get an erection.
Next, he dragged her into his room and took off her clothes, and he violated her. He tried to minimize this aspect to the agents by saying that he actually didn't go all the way, but the medical examiner's findings refuted those claims later on. He said that his original plan had always been to behead the victim in the bathtub while they were still alive, so that he could get all of the blood out before it coagulated, and then he could butcher them like an animal. But now, since Jamie was already deceased, he said he had to hurry to get this done because she was already going stiff. He said that he dragged her into the bathroom and put her hair in a ponytail because he didn't want blood to get in her hair. He said he had planned to keep her head on his computer desk and that he didn't want it getting all messed up. I mean, guys, you cannot make this up. It is so disturbing and so upsetting.
Because what I was going to do after that then was I was going to, while they were still alive and gagged, I was going to drape them over the bathtub and cut off their head. And then hang them there and let the blood all drain out, good and drained out. And I was going to keep the body around for a couple of days. I was going to set the head on my desk so it could, like, watch me.
Then he says he went and got one of his decorative daggers, put her over the bathtub, and began trying to behead her body. He said he put a bowl underneath because he wanted to collect the blood to taste it later, but that the blood was already clotting and actually started clogging up the drain. He said he sawed as much as he could and even went and got a hacksaw from his toolkit, but he was so tired that he wasn't able to get through her spine. He then said at that point that all of the blood going everywhere started to make him sick, and at this point he didn't even want to have sex with her anymore. This is a direct quote, guys.
And so I was going to drag her in there to the living room, but she, big for her age, paper said she's like 110 pounds, and I was having a hard time, flopping her over and rolling her around and dragging her around. I was pretty much exhausted by then, and like I said, as soon as I hit her, I wished I hadn't started this, but, as soon as I hit her the first time, I was like, well, now it's too late. I can't stop now. Yeah. I mean, that was the only reason I even went through with any of it. And then, like I said, I was disgusted at first, but then once I was climbing down on top of her, holding her down, choking her, I got aroused again. Okay. But so at this point, I was just disgusted. I was like, God, this mess. And because I couldn't even keep the blood in the tub. It was running down her and right down the side of the tub into the floor. And I was like, at this point, I'm just clean up this mess and get the body out of here. I'm not even going to have sex with her. Okay. And so I was already pretty upset. I can't believe I did this. Wish I hadn't did it. Wish I could take it back.
Right.
I mean, I was literally physically sick, partially from what I did, and partially I was, wore out and sweating and hot from the exertion. And
he even said, and I quote, "God, look at this mess that I have to deal with now." So he wrapped her up in tarp and in trash bags and put her in a plastic tub, all of which he had purchased in advance, specifically for his plan. He said that at that point her body was so stiff that he had to tape the lid down to keep it from popping off. Next, he brought her bicycle inside his apartment and began using his tools to disassemble it. He put the bike parts and the mug of milk that she had with her under his bed so that it would look like she had ridden away on her bike. He went and cleaned up the bathroom, and it was only a few minutes later that he got that knock on the door from Jamie's father, Curtis, and the apartment manager, looking for Jamie. After Kevin got done explaining all of this to the agents, he started profusely throwing up in the interview room. He started having a panic attack, and they actually had to get him medical attention, which, honestly, if that were me, I wouldn't have. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I would have let that disgusting evil monster rot on the floor of that interview room, truly.
You okay, buddy?
Probably gonna get somebody just to check him for the check. I think we're done. Go ahead.
Okay.
Have them bring somebody in and make sure he's okay. Hello? We're gonna get you some help here. It's 11:33. Kevin.
We're going to end because you're just too sick to keep going.
okay.
We might have an EMT. You want us to do that?
Yeah, get an EMT.
He's getting nauseous. We just want to.
So Kevin was charged with the first-degree murder of Jamie Rose, and at his arraignment, he pled not guilty.
Let's string him up! Let's string him up! Baby killer! It could have been my daughter! Could have been my daughter! Or my best friend's daughter! Could have been one of my kids! Let's string him up!
doctors say Kevin Underwood is not insane, is not a psychopath. Instead, they say he has a rare personality disorder, is bipolar, and has strange sexual urges involving women's clothing, children, and rape.
However, when the trial began, 2 years later, his defense told the jury that due to his horrific confession video, he would be found guilty, but that he should be spared from the death penalty due to his severe mental illness.
The DA says Underwood planned to kidnap someone, knock them unconscious with a cutting board, tie them up, force them to watch porn with him, cut their head off over the bathtub, then rape the corpse, while his victim's head sat on his desk watching. Mashburn says Underwood practiced his plan with a Barbie doll and put it into action with a girl still young enough to play with Barbies, Jamie Bolen. Underwood's lawyers admit jurors will likely find their client guilty, but they say he, like everyone else in the United States, deserves a fair trial, and there's more to the case than who did it. They say Underwood was taking antidepressants and told police he was concerned about what the medicine was doing to him. They say it's a story about two deaths, Jamie Bolen's and the death of the man accused of killing her. Underwood's lawyers asked jurors to spare his life just before he walked back to jail.
During the trial, mental health professionals testified that Kevin had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, Asperger's, and multiple deviant sexual disorders. They said that although he was treated for depression with a very low dose of Lexapro, the hypomania part of his bipolar disorder went undetected and untreated. Doctors for the defense stated that the proper medication could have lessened the effect of his paranoia and his behaviors. They said that the treatment could have reduced his sex drive and his depression, so he could have felt more socially comfortable and lessened his obsessive thoughts as well.
I don't think it's a mental illness or anything like that. I think he was just an evil person, and that's all there is to it. He's an animal.
Many entries from his blog were read, including one that said, "I can't control myself anymore. The computer won't let me. I want to be with it constantly. Of all the things I miss my mind the least. I'm in hell. I'm in hell. Shut up, shut up." Kevin's parents took the stand and discussed him as a child, and his father Larry said that he wished he would have told his son that he loved him. Ultimately, a jury only took 25 minutes to find him guilty of first-degree murder, but it was the sentencing phase that was more difficult to determine. While many people believed that putting a mentally ill person to death was cruel and unusual, the prosecution argued that what Jamie went through was cruel and unusual. He said that Kevin showed Jamie no mercy, so he shouldn't be shown any either.
A jury recommends a death penalty for a man convicted of killing a young girl. Kevin Underwood is convicted of killing 10-year-old Jamie Bolen of Purcell in 2006. The jury deliberated for more than 8 hours before reaching a verdict late last night. Underwood admits the murder was part of a bizarre fantasy to torture and eat his victim.
The jury came back with a recommendation for the death penalty, and a month later, a judge upheld their recommendation. Jamie's family, who had struggled to move on from what happened, finally felt like she had gotten justice, but they knew that there would be a lengthy appeals process, which lasted all the way up until 2018.
Curtis, what are your thoughts now after this? Really just don't know. Still have to absorb it.
What would you like to say to Jamie right now? You mentioned last week that you wanted to remember the good times and how Jamie was when she was here on Earth, and you and your family members had to leave the courtroom on more than several occasions.
Yes.
Because the testimony, the pictures, just too gruesome.
It just got too much. I mean, me and especially my brother, I'm glad some of the family stayed in there, because people needed to know, but there was also certain things that we just could not deal with. I don't want those pictures of her broken body or anything like that in my mind. And I don't want all the horrifying details of everything. I know it's bad enough. I know what the end result was. We lost her. And that's all that I wanted, and that's all we need to know. And now we have justice, and we take no pleasure in putting somebody to death. But this is the only just punishment for a crime like this.
Kevin Underwood is scheduled for death by lethal injection in December of 2023, which, I'm just going to say it right now, I'm going to celebrate that day. This person deserves to rot, whether that is death or rotting in a cell. This person deserves the ultimate worst, in my opinion. I'm curious to know if you agree or what you think about this case. The details are absolutely horrifying, and it goes to show that you never truly know what's going on in someone's mind. Kevin was clearly depressed and desperate for love and for affection as well. But I don't think that anyone expects someone to go to those lengths against another human being, let alone a child, especially when they haven't displayed any type of violence before whatsoever. It's just an internal struggle in their mind, and that's the scariest part because you'll never know unless they voice it, unless they act on it. It's a haunting thought to think about. Jamie's funeral was held at Purcell High School, and over 1,000 people showed up to show support for her and her family. She embodied kindness, innocence, and joy, making it more tragic to know that someone as pitiful as Kevin Underwood took her life for such selfish reasons. This case just serves as a chilling reminder of the tragic consequences that can occur when mental illnesses go untreated or misdiagnosed. The horrific murder of Jamie Rose has left a scar on the hearts of the Purcell community, and the family as well, and friends who all loved her. While it's crucial that we acknowledge the presence of mental health issues, it's equally important to recognize that it should never be used as a justification or an excuse for taking a life, especially the life of a precious, innocent child. I'm curious to know what you guys think about this case and if you think that the death penalty was the right decision, or should Kevin have gotten life in prison? Jennifer, Jamie's mom, has said that she doesn't want anyone to forget about her daughter.
That bright red hair just set her out above everybody, she was my copper top. She thought it was cool Mama drove a truck.
Running down the road on 18 wheels, a life in motion Jamie Bolen chose for 12 years.
I went into following my goal was to drive a truck. It was my dream. Since I was 5 years old, I wanted to drive a truck.
So she left her 3 children with their fathers and found 2 things on the interstate: freedom and destruction.
Meth. I was in a mess. I'm still fighting it. I was a year clean, almost to the day when Jamie died. And I relapsed.
Today she faults her childhood dream for the nightmare, the death of her middle child.
Because I blame trucking for me not being home, not being there for my kids, and not being there to save her.
To save her from Kevin Underwood, a man she'd never seen until the first day of the murder trial.
And he had hair the same as Jamie's. I was sitting going, how could he? He said he liked her. How could he do this?
While Jenny endured much of that trial, at the moment the jury announced a sentence of death, she was not there to hear it.
I was afraid that he wouldn't get the death penalty. I'm still afraid, because he has appeals. He has a chance to fight it.
Jenny's not been a fighter, says she'd rather run and hide, keep on moving. But the memory of her feisty 10-year-old redhead might just inspire her to stand still and strong.
So hopefully by sharing her story, we can help honor her by helping prevent tragedies like this one from happening in the future. And I also can't help but wonder, Kevin's online girlfriend, it hasn't been confirmed anywhere that I've seen, but I think that he was being catfished. And then I think when it came time for him to move out there, she backed out because I don't think she's a real person. Who knows who it was, in a basement, an old man, who knows? But I definitely don't think that was real. But if he had moved there, I wonder if Melissa would have been his victim. It's crazy to think that all of these thoughts and these struggles that he was facing were in his mind, and how deeply disturbing those fantasies were. Not only to then bring them to fruition, but to even have those thoughts and to have that material be what is driving you and, enticing you and turning you on. It is so foul and so disgusting. I know that this was not an easy case to listen to, guys. So if you did make it through to this point, to the end, I appreciate it, because I know that it was hard. It was hard for me to record it, so I can only imagine how hard it was to hear it. So I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in with me today. And until the next case, stay safe. Bye.